How much are you willing to pay to heat your home? When energy prices spiked recently, someone else made that choice for you. The question now is who pays for that expensive fuel? A plan to vaccinate one of Colorado's hardest hit workplaces kicks off a new phase of vaccinations in our state. Just a tiny portion of one of the state's largest burn areas is going to be reseeded for future growth. The strategy behind this week's project. And the future for a hidden gem of Colorado's black history tucked into the mountains of Gilpin County. Snow's soon flying, so come sit by the fire on Next. 3 in 4 homes in Colorado are heated with natural gas, including this one. Don't let the woodpile fool you. That fireplace was converted to gas a while ago. The price for natural gas shot up when Texas's power grid nearly went down recently. Colorado's utility companies shelled out a lot of money at that moment for natural gas. The state regulators want to make sure that they were smart about it, and what they determine could decide whether you're forced to pay for that natural gas. Marshall Zellinger explains.
When Texas was in the deep freeze, it impacted Colorado.
The typical price of a decathermal gas, what we've seen in Colorado, has been below $3 for 2 or 3 years now, and probably hasn't exceeded more than about $6 or $7 in the last couple of years. This is on the order of not just 10 times, but even higher than that, close to 100 times as much for the cost of gas.
Xcel Energy reported to its investors that it spent $650 million on electric and natural gas fuel costs. Atmos Energy said it was between $2.5 and $3.5 billion between Colorado, Kansas, and Texas. The 3 commissioners that make up the Colorado Public Utilities Commission want those energy companies, and a few others, to explain why. The PUC could prevent the energy companies from passing on that cost to customers if they don't like the answers they're given. Like, did companies first try to ask customers to conserve, similar to what the Platte River Power Authority did? Yesterday, Democratic Governor Jared Polis, who appointed 2 of the 3 members of the Public Utilities Commission, said consumers should not be expected to shoulder unexpected, exceptional costs without first being advised to reduce usage. In the meantime, Atmos is telling customers bills in the near term will not include any of the unusually high gas prices from the historic winter storms. And Xcel wrote in its investor filing, "We intend to work with our commission to recover these costs over time to help mitigate the impacts on customer bills." Investor filings can be interesting to read. The PUC has given the utility companies until March 5th to respond to its questions, which, Kyle, include the 3 or 4 days between, I think it was February 13th and 16th. What did you do about hedging your prices? And did you warn customers that maybe they should conserve? I'm learning a lot about a process besides just going to the thermostat and turning it up. I'm learning a lot that I didn't know.
So I think, Marshall, everybody's fear is what we've heard from out of Texas, where people suddenly get these just astronomical bills. What I hear from Atmos and from Xcel is that they're not going to pull that. They know they probably can't get away with that, but maybe spread some of it out over the long run. That's what I read into that.
Yeah, and if the PUC justifies it all, I don't know if the PUC has to approve the plan for it to be smoothed out over time, but based on these filings, and these are for investors, so they know, hey, if you're going to invest in our company, just know we're not doing this to our customers, that it will be so that these customers stay in existence and don't try to find their own other utility company, i.e. what Boulder tried to do for a while.
Aha. All right, Marshall, thank you. The site of one of the worst COVID-19 outbreaks in Colorado is going to shut down business so that they can give employees the vaccine next week, even giving them a cash incentive to take the shot. The JBS meatpacking plant in Greeley will host vaccine drives March 6th and 7th. The union there, UFCW Local 7, says it secured vaccines for 3,000 of its members, as well as thousands more doses for non-union employees at the plant. JBS will shut down plant operations for both days. They tell me that employees will be guaranteed their minimum 36 hours pay for the week, and they will get 4 hours pay plus $100 if they choose to be vaccinated. National Guard's going to be up there helping to run that clinic. Meatpacking workers are in the essential worker phase of vaccinations. We're not officially there yet. The governor's office told Next this afternoon that their plan has been to open up that essential worker phase on March 5th. So that'd be right before the JBS Greeley Clinic. 6 union members died of COVID-19 at the Greeley plant, and nearly 500 tested positive. Our state's vaccination rate took a tick up today, as it has been doing daily. 14.3% of our state's population has now received the first dose of the COVID vaccine. It's a bit more than 824,000 people, and about half of them have had both doses. We continue to make progress with hospitalization numbers. 376 patients at last check. That's down 11 patients from the day before. We had 440 COVID patients in Colorado's hospitals this time last week. Our positivity rate took a one-day dip in a good direction. It's kind of plateaued recently. It was at 3.2% yesterday, better than a couple days prior. Our weekly average has been hovering around 3.6% since the beginning of last week. The United States Postal Service is about to get less mail, thanks to a Coloradan. Less M-A-L-E mail, as in it's overseen by a bunch of dudes right now. And President Biden has picked a Coloradan who specializes in mail-in voting to get into that all-mail mail club. Amber McReynolds was just nominated to be on the Postal Service Board, which currently can hold its meetings in a building without a women's restroom. McReynolds used to be Denver's elections director. She runs the National Vote at Home Institute. She's registered independent, but she's expected to side with Democrats who could, say, decide to replace the head of the Postal Service, who was criticized over how he handled mail-in ballots. McReynolds and Biden's other two picks still need Senate confirmation before they can head in there and start making financial decisions for the Postal Service and decide ultimately who's in charge of that operation. It was 99 years ago that black entrepreneurs in Denver began building a resort of their own in Gilpin County, a mountain getaway for African Americans who face discrimination at other vacation spots. Lincoln Hills grew into a thriving community of cabins, drawing families who wanted an escape both from life in the city and from racial inequality. Now that's the past. This Black History Month, I want to talk to you about Lincoln Hills' present and its future, and our role in helping that special place impact even more lives. Our Word of Thanks microgiving campaign this week supports Lincoln Hills Cares. It's a nonprofit that's based at that old resort property. Today, Lincoln Hills is a place where every year more than 1,000 kids, most from marginalized communities in Colorado, get a chance to explore nature, to learn about science, and to gain new appreciation for their cultural history. These young people come to Lincoln Hills from all across Colorado. The folks in charge there tell me a lot of these young people have parents who, because of economics or maybe just unfamiliarity with the outdoors, can't provide them with the mountain experience that a lot of Coloradans take for granted. Lincoln Hills Cares is getting ready for a busy 2021, full of Boys and Girls Clubs and YMCA groups, church groups, other student visits. They're always on the lookout for groups that want to come up. We have the chance to help them expand their programming and to add even more young people from across Colorado. Young Coloradans who come away from Lincoln Hills with new interests and new skills in outdoor survival and biology and entomology, not to mention a new appreciation for what previous generations of black Coloradans built at that special camp in Gilpin County. Text the word THANKS to 303-871-1491. I'll send you that link to donate. As always, I'll match the first 50 donations of $5 that come in. Together, your giving is likely to pass the $3 million mark as we help out this landmark of black history in Colorado become even stronger for the future. He was often the only of his profession.
Let's just talk about being the only black person in the room.
Let's talk about it. And let's talk about how Judge Gary Jackson shaped Colorado and held the door open for others. And just what happens to all those pieces of plane that fell out of the sky over the weekend? I mean, there's going to be an investigation, but can people keep stuff? No, serious question. Serious answer. Next. One retired judge's influence is all over if you know where to look, including his role in the location of Coors Field. Judge Gary Jackson's celebrated career on the bench has ended. He looks back with Arunusha Roy on how systemic racism and movements for equality shaped his life and his work.
The word only has followed Judge Gary Jackson for a long time. The only black deputy district attorney in Colorado in 1970. The only black assistant U.S. attorney in the state from 1974 to 1976.
One of the trial lawyers to acquire the property to build Coors Field.
The word only is just the beginning of his story.
Great-grandfather was the son of a slave master and an enslaved woman. However, he learned to read and write.
He was further shaped by several events in the 1960s when Jackson was going to college.
The March on Washington in August of 1963.
When he did get his degree, there were only 15 black lawyers in the state.
Systemic types of racism and barriers.
His goal was to change that by rising in his career, and he was guided by Judge James Flanagan.
In 1957, he became the very first diverse judge in Colorado. His family broke the red line in Denver. He had a home on Monaco Parkway. And back in those days, most black families, because of redlining, were forced to live west of York Street, or they lived in the pocket of homes like my family lived in North Cherry Creek.
It was the personal encouragement from one man breaking barriers to another. That stayed with Jackson 50 years later, towards the end of his career, marked by another historic movement.
Changes with respect to our justice system,
which this time he watched from his court chambers.
And I have no greater skills or intellect than the people that are watching me in this interview. Ordinary people can do extraordinary things.
For Next, I'm Anusha Roy.
Judge Jackson retired in December. Early in his career, he helped start the Sam Carey Bar Association, which led to several other minority bar associations in Colorado. Jackson says he can still see that there is a lot of work to do to diversify Colorado's judicial system. Hey, may I make a recommendation? I'll point you towards something that I really think is worth your time. Cornelia Vertenstein started giving piano lessons as a teenager in Romania, and she continued to do so well into her 90s as she was living in Denver and most recently teaching piano students remotely via Zoom. New York Times' John Branch had a beautiful story on Cornelia a few months back and wrote again in remembrance after the Holocaust survivor passed away earlier this month. One of the final things she told her daughter was, "If I die, don't be sad. I led a productive life helping children." I invite you to read about the extraordinary life of Cornelia Vertenstein. We'll put a link to the Times story on the next Facebook page. All those jet bits dropped on Broomfield. Who gets to keep them when the investigation's over? Stuff is dropping from the sky on purpose in western Colorado this week to bring some burned land back to life. And this symbolizes the start of something new on Next. Tonight's next question is about what a friend here at work calls last weekend's plane rain, when parts of that 777 fell down into Broomfield. The question, what happens to all those bits of aircraft once they're collected and studied? NTSB tells us that after scene photographs and measurements are taken, all those parts are identified, collected, and stored securely. They need to be protected out of the weather for the duration of the investigation, and that could take up to 2 years. NTSB investigators will eventually go through it piece by piece and send anything that needs further analysis to their lab in D.C. In the end, this is the part I was fascinated by, when the investigation's all over, the parts are then transferred to their legal owner, which at that point is often an insurance company. The key ingredient in recovering from one of the largest wildfires in state history is seeds, strategically placed seeds. The Bureau of Land Management has started reseeding the burn scar left behind by the Pine Gulch fire. They do it by hand as well as from the air. They plan to cover 22,000 acres in seeds, mostly native grasses and shrubs, to help restore the native ecosystem and try and stabilize the soil. The reseeding will take a couple of weeks' time. They do that while the snow is on the ground to help the seeds germinate. Now, they chose those 22,000 acres out of the 139,000 that burned because those areas they felt were the least likely to recover without intervention. The BLM tells us that most of the burned acreage should just rebound on its own. A fire last summer burned more than 200 square miles on the western slope, Mesa and Garfield counties. If the Pine Gulch fire does not immediately jump to mind, it was briefly the largest wildfire in Colorado's recorded history, but then right after that, the Cameron Peak and the East Troublesome fires came along and grew larger late in the fall.
Winter weather advisory posted for Denver as those clouds moving into the city bring snow tonight, which could turn heavy at times. After a day with temperatures cooler than average in the low 40s, we're going into the teens this evening. 37 degrees at the airport right now, and we will continue to monitor the snow, which is beginning to turn quite heavy along the Front Range foothills, where up to a foot of snow is possible. Denver is in the 3 to 5 inch range, and areas around DIA and points eastward will see 2 to 4 and lighter amounts. But a winter weather advisory covers the I-25 corridor from Fort Collins down to the New Mexico line. And right now it looks as though the bullseye for some of those heavier totals will be over the northern and western suburbs. Tonight, winter weather advisory for heavy snow at times. Our low at 17, 3 to 6 inches of snow. Snow ends by 8 a.m., but the morning drive will be greatly impacted. Clearing in the afternoon with temperatures in the 30s. Heading into the weekend, a 20% chance of snow on Saturday.
That's right, get after it. Longtime Next viewers will remember we built an army of dancing babies with our original theme music. Now the music's matured a bit. It apparently appeals to 3-year-olds. Caroline from Littleton is the first recruit in our army of dancing toddlers. We're trying to attract a slightly older demographic these days, thinking 2 to 5 years old, ideally. Getting outside in beautiful parts of Colorado should not be a luxury only for the well-off. A piece of Black history in our state provides the path for younger Coloradans to explore the outdoors, and we're helping them expand their work. Next. You would be amazed and perhaps embarrassed to learn how many young Coloradans have never had the opportunity to explore the mountains that are right over there. Assume it's the same direction at your house. The nonprofit Lincoln Hills Cares says that the reason for that could be economic barrier of mountain getaways, or maybe just kids have parents who are unfamiliar with nature, don't feel comfortable taking them to the high country. Lincoln Hills Cares runs outdoor education programs for young people from marginalized communities across Colorado. They're based up at a property in Gilpin County that was created in the 1920s as the first resort west of the Mississippi that was open to Black Americans. Text the word thanks to 303-871-1491. I'll send you that link to join me and tons of other Next viewers in donating to support and expand their work up there. Every dollar raised, say, will be dedicated to programming. This week, your Word of Thanks microgiving campaign is likely to pass the $3 million mark. You got started with this last June. That is pretty exceptional. Feedback tonight is for you from Michael in Centennial, who says, obviously 2020 was an extremely rough year for a few million Coloradans, yet what you started, the Word of Thanks campaign, has been nothing short of a miracle. All 3 million raised. Michael says, wow, and thanks. That is from him to you, and I'll see you next time.